So hi, Dr. Demetra, or Dr. Demi, as we will probably go on from here on out on the podcast. Thank you for joining me. I'm excited to talk to you because I'm in athletics, and I still have a hard time calling myself an athlete because I feel like I was an athlete in my teens, and then I stopped when I went to college, and then I didn't do really anything what I would call athletic for like 20 years until I started to think about doing more endurance training. I started doing a 5K, and I never ran over a mile in my life. And I started doing triathlons. So I still have a hard time wrapping that around that, to call myself an athlete. But I guess I'm trying to get over that. I'm trying to get over that hurdle and say, okay, yeah, I'm an athlete now. But anyway, you got on my radar because you are an athlete, or were, and are now getting back into athletics, a pretty high level competitive athlete in triathlons, which I love to do. And you're also a chiropractor, and you're also in functional medicine. And then you started talking about women's health, specifically when it comes to athletics, overall health, and future health and fertility. And that really hit a lot of things that I love to talk about, because I love talking about getting in shape, athletics. I love talking about fertility and women's health and adrenal fatigue and all these things that I hope we're going to touch on today. So thank you for joining me. And if you want to say hi and a little bit about yourself, I'd be happy to let you have the floor.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Cheryl. And congratulations on finally again. And so I am a fraternal twin. I have a twin. And so that's kind of how I got into sports, just wanting to do everything that he did. So from a young age, I played everything, primitive in high school. I played 1 year and to move back home. So I'd gone to school, got into just kind of still stayed with it, jumped back into sports, but mostly through coaching. And I had really, really missed competing. So that's how I had kind of gotten into endurance. The endurance sports was, I just started running, and I was like, well, I could do this on my own time. And then fast forward, moving to Texas, they're a pretty good triathlon community here. So once I got in, just the competitiveness and the individual, depending on myself, just kind of totally sucked me in. And yeah, by my second year, was doing my first half Ironman, and just had a lot of quick success. My first half Ironman, I qualified for the 70.3 World Championships, got on the podium. So that really quick fortune just got me wanting more and more and craving more. And I was teaching at the time. I was not a chiropractor yet. I was teaching, so I had summers off, and just all of a sudden my whole world, revolved around triathlon, and I had really nothing else on my radar except wanting to get better. At the same time, I had this win at all costs mentality, and just really thought, the more you do, the more fitness you're going to get. And that was it. And so, eventually, after 5 or 6 competitive years of triathlon, my health in subtle ways started to kind of degrade. And then once being in chiropractic school, you start to look at things with a different eye, a different perspective. You look at function differently. And so I started to ask myself questions, and you start to learn a little bit more about how the body should work. And, and I'll let you kind of chime back in, but I just kind of, being a female and wanting to compete and be an athlete and do all the things that guys do, we totally can, as females, we can do whatever we want, but the truth is we have to do things differently, because physiologically we are different. But, long story short, it was my intense competitive years and my combination of going to chiropractic school and then finding a functional medicine practitioner to help me, that kind of ignited my healing and my passion for helping women find the balance and still trying to attain that maximal performance without sacrificing their health.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you're a little bit younger than me. So when I was doing sports back in my teen years, and no one ever even talked about the difference between men and women. And I mean, we obviously had differences. We have hormonal cycles that, we have fluctuating hormones and our adrenal glands get affected. And, we have differences than men, but no one's ever talked about that until really fairly recently. And I'm not too sure how recently, because I just kind of started getting back into sports in the last 4 years. But I've really only seen it in the last 2-3 years. I think that I've kind of noticed it on the radar of people to even talk about.
Yeah, I think, so, I mean, I was diagnosed and given the title of adrenal fatigue, I think it was 6 years ago now. And when I took a little break, and not even took it, but just cut back training quite a bit. Yeah, the same question all the time was, what is adrenal fatigue? And then so often the dismissal of, oh, that's not a real thing. I would agree that in the last 2-3 years, it's become more mainstream, and adrenal health in general. I mean, I don't think most people even knew about the organ. So yeah, I think just mostly in the last few years, it's been more talked about. And I think there's a huge movement just in this last year about, as a female athlete, and even as a female non-athlete, just starting to kind of connect and learn a little bit more. You mentioned the menstrual cycle. It really governs so much of our everyday function, even outside of training, but it's so, so important with training. So there's a big wave and a movement with cycle syncing, exercising, doing certain exercises at different times in your cycle, things like that.
Yeah, so what is it about adrenal fatigue? So people who have never heard of it, or maybe have heard of it but don't really understand it, what is adrenal fatigue? What are some signs that people can look out, for in themselves? And what does it mean to their overall health?
Yeah, so basically your adrenals, are what puts out your cortisol, which is your stress hormone. When we think stress, most often we think worry, emotional stress, and burn-in. But as far as, as an athlete, every time we exercise, we are setting off the stress response, the sympathetic nervous system, and our adrenals are pumping out cortisol, which is also helping us have the energy to do our workouts, to meet the demand. And so the issue is when you stay in that stress response and you are kicking out cortisol way too much, that, there comes a point where your body is going to start, stealing things to make more cortisol. So, if you are a triathlete, we are all working out more than our adrenals and our bodies are used to. So, the more you get into the sport, that's where you learn, like, recovery is so important, especially when you get into the Ironman events, because that's only one aspect of stress. Then you have to consider we aren't professional athletes. So we have other jobs. We are parents. We have, 9 to 5s to go to, and then we're doing all of this activity. So you keep causing more and more of this cortisol output. The precursor to make cortisol is called pregnenolone, and we actually get that from cholesterol. And this pregnenolone is actually the precursor to make all of our sex hormones as well. So stress trumps everything. So if the body thinks that, there's a tiger and it has to run, it's going to steal that pregnenolone to keep making cortisol. So early warning signs, for an athlete might just be like, you're not recovering as well. You can't sleep at night. The wired and tired is like a hallmark of adrenal fatigue, where you wake up in the morning and you just can't get going. You're super tired. But by bedtime, when you should be winding down, you can't fall asleep. And that's because that cortisol is too high in the evening. But when we need it, as it naturally should be, in the morning, it's not there. That's what we call a flipped curve when we're looking at analysis. Late stage, when you get into stage 2 and then stage 3, I mean, it's a pretty constant fatigue. I mean, closer to stage 3, a lot of people get stuck in stage 2 for a while, but adrenal exhaustion, you're pretty much not able to even compete in the sport anymore. You know, it's a struggle to even get out of bed, get to work, daily tasks. So I really think athletes are they're gonna hone in on those early signs pretty early on, because we're all gonna be like, what the heck? Like, right? We're worried about our performance and you want to get back out there for your next workout. So the good news is I think athletes kind of, are more in tune with their bodies a little bit and ask the question, what's going on, regardless of the motivation.
So what about the people that you work with who maybe want to get into improving their fitness level, but they're already in adrenal fatigue? Because there's people out there that are so stressed out from childcare, jobs, just emotional stress, emotional traumas, physical traumas that they've had, all these things that cause stress on our system. So what are some ways that you encourage those people to get some fitness back into their life, but also without causing more stress on their system?
Absolutely. Truthfully, endurance sports won't be the avenue for them. And even recovering from adrenal fatigue, depending on, where the person is at, you've got to scale it back. If you love running, you work in walk, run intervals, give your body a rest period, you shorten the workouts. Sometimes we even have to go back to walking. I find I like to, especially for endurance athletes, a way for them to still be kind of pushing themselves is introduce strength training with a lot of long rest periods. It's not that you can't work out at all. You just have to work out differently. And sometimes when we look specifically, at a graph and we can see where cortisol levels are dipping, where they shouldn't be, things like that. Sometimes I will have patients work out in that time frame, to try and naturally boost it, like the 3 o'clock slump when you're going to grab extra coffee instead, if it's at all possible, to try and, have a 30-minute workout there. But I kind of tailor it to the individual. A big thing with triathletes is, not wanting to leave the sport, and understanding that myself as an athlete. I try to support that as much as possible, but sometimes it is the case that you completely have to step away and take a break to heal before you can come back stronger.
Yeah, and I know that the very competitive athletes definitely don't want to do that, but what are the consequences if they don't? Like, where are they headed, and what is going to be the long-term effects of constant adrenal fatigue and how that's going to affect your hormones and your future health?
Exactly. So the big issue is, if you keep pushing and you keep training, your body, is going to try and adapt to whatever you put it under. And our bodies are super intelligent, and they'll do the best that they can. But, and I explained that mechanism of cortisol stealing pregnenolone. What's going to happen is cortisol is going to keep stealing, and you're going to see a reduction in all of your sex hormones, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, all of them. So, testosterone, you're going to see a reduction in your performance. We absolutely need that. You're also going to see lack of energy, lack of interest, loss of libido. Estrogen is probably one of the most important role players, because you're going to lose your cycle, which is pretty common. And unfortunately, back when I was training, it was almost like a rite of passage among some of the young women I was training with. that you had gotten to a certain leanness, at the same time is just incredibly unhealthy. But a loss of cycle, and then bone health is so important to estrogen levels. So, you talk to a 25-year-old female, talk to me back at that time when winning was everything and the next PR. And, I sought some counseling, and the first thing that it was brought to my attention was, well, do you want to have, your fertility? At 25, I did not really care about that. But when she started to talk to me about my bone health, in 20 years from now, do you want to have osteoporosis? Definitely not, right? I want to be an athlete my entire life. I want to, so there's so many different aspects of it. When you weaken your adrenal gland, your thyroid goes hand in hand. It's, being overworked as well. And you start to see a lot of crossover, a lot of hypothyroidism, and with all the exposures and other things, we see a lot of autoimmune, and you're just going to start to see health degrade on every level at that point. So, there is a point where you have to say, what's more important, my health or the sport?
And I think a lot of women, especially young women, they equate their cycles and the health of their menstrual cycle purely to their fertility and ability to have children. Whereas I think you and I, as chiropractors and looking at like the functional health of someone, your cycle is a sign of your overall health and wellness. So if somebody's going to have an easier time getting pregnant if they're healthy, just healthy across the board, not because their cycle's normal. Your cycle will be more normal, whatever normal is, if you are healthy. So it's about overall health and wellness, and fertility is just a side effect, really, of being healthy.
Absolutely. And a huge other symptom that I forgot to say was the brain fog and the neurological function. So much what we work with as chiropractors as well. And if your body doesn't have the energy, and progesterone is a big neurological stimulator, so is estrogen, super important for brain health also. And, the brain fog was so intense for me when I was in chiropractic college recovering from adrenal fatigue. It was so tough. But what you said, about the cycle, it absolutely tells the health of a female, like plain and simple. But I remember sitting in my physiology class in chiropractic school, and I remember her saying that 15 pounds overweight was healthier than 15 pounds underweight. And it hit me so hard because I was trying to recover my cycle. And, while training, the focus was how much weight could I lose before I would see a drop in power on my bike. Everything was about performance, nothing about health. So I just started to look at things with a different eye. But the other thing is, now that I'm on the other side, been practicing chiropractic and some functional medicine, and still trying to find, definitely I'm a new mom and not competitive right now. So trying to pretty much just basic, maintenance of fitness, and definitely will get back to it. But what I would love is to find some triathlon coaches that are willing to look at the female cycle and plan training. I would, love to see what that looks like. Because my guess is, if we honored the female physiology, and we created training programs specific to females, I wonder if performance would be so much improved, and, athletes would feel so much better. It'd be an enjoyable process. As a triathlete yourself, like there's some points when we're undernourished, just much training, you just get cranky.
Yeah. I'm at that point at this, actually today, right now. So I'm just telling my staff, I'm on like day 2 of my cycle, and I just actually started training again this week, getting ready for another half Ironman next year. And I'm like,
Awesome.
man, I'm kind of cranky today because I just started like training, and at the end of my cycle, beginning of my, end of last cycle, beginning of this cycle. And I'm like, yeah, that's normal. I should be cranky right now. But actually my coach, Brent Detta, I'll put a shout out to him at Detta Endurance. He has a wife who's a runner and a daughter who's an athlete. He also has a younger son, and he is attuned to cycles and performance and training. Maybe not as fine-tuned as, someone who's looking at functional medicine type fine-tuned, but he definitely wants to know kind of where you are at in your cycle and how that's affecting your performance and how that's affecting your training and having the feedback and all that kind of stuff too. So, and he's the one who sent me that newer app that was out that's tracked performance with women's cycles. I can't remember what the name of the app is right now. You might remember what that is. But it's the one that the US soccer team was using.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of that either. I know MyFlow is an okay one, but it's not as performance based. But yeah, just to kind of a little bit, and that is awesome. And I would say that I had a great coach as well too. Just 10 years ago, my immature self just didn't listen as well. But I wanted to chat just a bit about the cycle syncing. There's so much out there, and you can go ahead and look it up. And I wish I knew the name of that app. But just generally, kind of the two biggest takeaways, because you said you're day 2 of your cycle, 3 to 5 days leading up to your cycle is generally where our hormones are least supportive of, our endurance sport. You're just going to have the least amount of energy. And that kind of also carries into the beginning of your cycle. And it's kind of around day 3 where you start to get back to normal and things pick back up. And then mid-cycle, when you're ovulating, is your absolute best time for your longest, most intense workouts. For the triathlete with the A race that falls mid-cycle, that's living the dream right there. So even if you don't want to absolutely track every single day and what's going on, if you can kind of keep that in mind, day 3 to day 14 is your best time to build endurance. And then that latter half of the cycle, we are geared more to, strength training. And the very end there, some yoga stuff the last few days. So if you were to absolutely, need a couple of rest days, a couple of days leading up to school.
I actually lost just the very, very end of that. Can you repeat that last little bit about the best time to, sorry, my internet's a little sketchy. I had to move to a different spot today. So just the last little part.
Yeah, so I think the last thing I was talking about is if you were to plan your rest days, I know we very rarely give ourselves 2 days back to back, but if you were to give yourself 1 or 2 rest days, the ideal time would be, the 1 to 2 days right before your cycle starts.
Cool. And I actually, I looked up that app real quick. It's Fit, FITR Woman, right? Fitter Woman is the app that talks about the different phases. And I'll have to say that I like the information in it, but I actually told my coach, I said, it's kind of depressing because they tell you all the things that are bad about that time of your cycle. So if you have a race and it doesn't land in a great time, it's telling you all the horrible things that, or not the horrible things, but it tells you the things that aren't optimum during that time frame. And for me, the mental game of that isn't always the best thing.
Absolutely. And I think a big takeaway there, I also didn't use that app. I use MyFlow just because it gives you more of the general directions. But if your A race falls in those last 2 days, what the research shows is like your VO2 max, and your performance, your major performance indicators are still there. I think in a full Ironman, they would probably definitely hit you after a while, but your body's still going to be able to perform. I think what's most important after that is recovery. You're going to feel worse after, right? Our bodies will, step up to the occasion. We're just, ancestrally, we are designed that way. But, in recovery, that's when you definitely have to respect it. Like, okay, this wasn't the optimal time for my body to race. I've got to give it more time thereafter, especially the longer the race is.
Yeah, I haven't even wrapped my head around doing a full Ironman yet. That still seems a little crazy talk to me, but I'm also nursing a toddler and working, and I wasn't an endurance athlete. Like I said, I've never ran over a mile in my life before I was 39 years old. So I'm working my way in there slowly, and I might get there eventually, but a half seems about right right now.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I wish back when I was racing, I'd probably do about 7 or 8 races a year, mostly sprints and Olympics, and then 1 or 2 half Ironmans. And because I, had that quick success, I started putting so many expectations on my racing, and I was like, I don't want to do an Ironman unless I can do it in 11 whatever hours. And I'm so disappointed because I never actually did it. And now I'm like, if I run a 5K and today I rode my bike 15 miles, like that's winning right now. The, new practice and a toddler at home. So that's amazing that you are even doing all of that. But I put it out there that for my 40th birthday year, I think I want to do my full Ironman. So we'll see.
Oh, my 40th birthday year, I had another baby. So I took that year off.
Well, I'll tell you, it's funny. That's an iron, that can be an Ironman in itself. It's after I had my first son, my midwife said, well, Demetra, how's that compared to a marathon? And I said, I think I'd rather run a marathon untrained than do that again right now.
I know there is some truth to that. These babies it's hard. I think I was more winded walking around in my 3rd trimester than I was during my half Ironman at the end. I'm like, oh, it's so hard. I can't walk upstairs. Our bodies are made to do this, but there's definitely, I tell all my pregnant moms to take care of. I'm like, there comes a point at the end of your 3rd trimester that you do have to get kind of miserable. Otherwise, you will not push the baby out. You'll live in there forever.
That's so true. In my labor, my mantra to myself was like, I ran marathons, I did half Ironmans, I can do this. And now I think when I go back to racing, it will be like, you had unmedicated natural vaginal births, you can do this.
Yeah, well, that's kind of my mantra. I had 3 of them before I started. So if you had to, I know sometimes it's hard to talk to the young person because they have their focus. They're not thinking about the future. I know that's how you said you kind of were, and a lot of people are like that. I just want to talk or tell women in general how important it is for them to have their cycle. Like, I see so many women who are doing medications or birth control, all those kinds of things to stop their cycles. And that really scares me just for their overall health and wellness, how important that hormone, rhythm is in their life.
Absolutely. The more you dive into this, there's times in our cycle where, our creativity is more supported. Our self-reflection going inward, it's so unique because everything is tied to every aspect of our function. Every single one of those sex hormones, I almost hate that they're called sex hormones because they have function, besides, the sexual, production. Like I said, brain health, mood, depression is such an issue. And, if we have, balanced hormones, and it ties into balanced gut and healthy gut and all of that as well. But, I think we'd be on less antidepressants and things like that. And, so many people get on birth control, not just to prevent pregnancy, but, for acne or for, so many different symptoms that are really symptoms of a problem that is hormone imbalance. And you're just masking that problem. You're not correcting it. So you're on that pill for 5-10 years, it depletes nutrients, it shuts down the communication between the brain and the ovaries. You're missing out on experiencing the highs and the emotion and the joys of what it is to be a woman, honestly. Anybody who has been on the pill and off the pill, I personally completely notice a difference in every aspect. There's a nicer person off of it. But as far as athletes, what I really focus on with my young athletes is really their performance, because that's what they care about. I tell them about all these consequences, but the truth is sometimes they don't care yet, and so I tell them about these consequences. But what it really comes back to also is that if we supported your physiology, your performance would actually improve. And I absolutely believe that, because now I had my son 2.5 years ago, and I completely do all of my training most of the time, depending on what's going on with my cycle. And I've never felt better, on every level. I could be fitter if I put in more time, but I always, really just bring it back to their performance, and that, we would improve it by following this, because, that's what the data is showing. And that's why I think it's so powerful that we did have that article about the U.S. women's soccer team, because they talked about that being a big factor in them, winning the whole thing, winning the World Cup. These are top level athletes. And, they approach their cycle, not just performance, but social, emotional, what's going on at this time in the cycle. So you're looking at world championship, some of the best female athletes in the world, showing you that, when you focus on female physiology, you're going to get the best performance out of a female.
And I think that's awesome, because I think as more women get into these roles as coaches and scientists and doctors, and we're going to understand more about female performance and optimizing our own health and our vitality, and doing it without hurting our future health and our current physiology and performance. So I'm seeing lots of great advancements in that. And I think I'm excited for my daughter, who is 3, and what the world holds for her when she gets to be, your age or my age, or later on in her life. There'll be so much more information and support, I think. So the last thing I wanted to ask you is, for someone who is trying to get back into athletics, or maybe is a young female athlete and is starting to get concerned about her health, or wants to do things in a more healthful way, what are some of the tips that you give to someone without being able to, do their blood work and check their cortisol levels, and make it really specific for them? What are some things that you would encourage them to do, as well as get all that stuff checked?
Absolutely. Sometimes we just need to simplify it. And so I always start with what do you enjoy? Because, here you and I, we're talking about triathlons and endurance, but I get so many people who are hate running, but they think that, running is it, so, a lot of times, just whatever, if you love dancing, and there's so many different things, just, ways to move your body. And then we just talk about, that if you do more cardio based sports, those are best in the first half of your cycle. In the second half, if you like strength training, that's a great time. If you don't like strength training, but you love yoga, Pilates, things like that, slow it down, do the more form focus, feel the muscles burn, as opposed to, the sweat pouring, heart thumping, just, that cardio versus, the slow strength muscle burn. And just kind of simplify it, to that, and trying different activities and things like that. And honestly, the truth is, no one needs to work out more than an hour for health benefits. And, when you've got busy moms who are just getting back into sports, or, it doesn't even have to be a busy mom. We're all busy nowadays. 15, 30 minutes. There's so many of these high intensity workout places that are pretty neat. There's so many things online that you can look up. 15-minute high intensity interval workouts. Again, those would be better, in the first half of your cycle. But, I think where we get into the most trouble is when we start thinking more is better. Because for females, a lot of times more is not better. So if you're just looking at general wellness and you just want to be healthy, no more than 60 minutes, and truly, a good 30-minute workout a day is what I tell my patients is truly enough for health and wellness.
Cool. Yeah. Because I see some people, especially women who are trying to lose weight, who think they need to run for hours and hours and just do endurance work. And that's going to, help them to lose weight, where in some instances it causes such a stress response on your body because they're in adrenal fatigue that they end up, their body goes into, kind of starvation mode, and they hold on to more weight instead of losing weight. So there's that little thing in there too. I just wanted to throw in.
Absolutely. Some of us are a little more sensitive than others, but that's where you definitely see some people training for a marathon and they don't lose any weight, sometimes gain weight. And that's totally that stress response.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for shedding some light on this topic for me and chatting with me about it. I know I am super interested in it. I know there's others out there who are, and I hope that this reaches the people who need it the most. How can people reach out to you if they have more questions or want more information?
Yeah, probably the easiest way on social media. My practice on Facebook is Wholehearted Chiropractic. Instagram at Dr. Demi, just DRDEME. And then if you're a female athlete, and this stuff really interests you, I have a private Facebook group that, the more the merrier. I'd love all women interested in improving their fitness to come join. It's called Biohacking Your Body, Improving Female Fitness and Function. So love for you to join us there.
Yeah, and I'm part of that group, and I love the information that you're sharing in that as well. So I will put links to all your contact information in the show notes and on our website. If you're listening, I have a website specifically for the podcast called fearlessfamilyhealth.com. This one will be on there with what this podcast is about, and any way you can contact Dr. Demi or myself in our Facebook community as well. And then past podcasts too, if you want to take a listen to other topics on health and wellness and all that fun stuff. So thank you so much for joining me, Doctor. And what city in Texas are you in?
I'm in Dallas.
Okay. So if anybody is in Dallas, Texas, and looking for a awesome doc who's doing some functional wellness and working with athletes as well as all kinds of people, then check her out.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.